Make sure to hit subscribe for more real-life stories. My wife kicked me out after her best friend accused me of making a move on her. 5 months later, that same friend admitted it was all jealousy. I handed Jo the divorce papers, and she completely broke down. Never thought I'd be writing something like this. But here I am, sitting at my brother's place at 2 a.m., unable to sleep, trying to figure out how my life unraveled in less than 24 hours. I'm 34, work in cybersecurity, and until yesterday, I thought my marriage was solid. My wife, Jo, is 32 and a physical therapist. We've been together for 9 years, married 6. No kids yet, but we were planning to start once her student loans were more manageable. Her best friend, Madison, has been around since day one. They've been high school friends from Ohio, stayed close through college, and when Madison moved here 5 years ago, she practically became part of the household. Multiple dinners every week, Friday night girls' nights, nonstop texting. At first, I didn't mind. Madison had just gone through a divorce. Her ex cheated on her, and it completely wrecked her. I figured it was right for Jo to be there for her. I even helped Madison move apartments last year. Looking back, there were warning signs. Madison would give this look whenever Jo kissed me goodbye. Hard to describe, but definitely not happy for us. Little comments like, must be nice having someone who actually shows up, or, you're so lucky, Jo. Some of us aren't that fortunate. I chalked it up to divorce bitterness. About 6 months ago, we all went out to dinner. Jo went to the bathroom, and Madison asked if I ever got tired of playing the perfect husband. I laughed it off. She stared at me too long and said, Jo talks about me constantly, and it's honestly exhausting. Again, I assumed she was just bitter and single. Then, yesterday, everything exploded. It was a normal Tuesday. I got home around 6 o'clock. Jo was already making dinner. She seemed off, but I figured it had been a long day at work. We ate in silence, which felt unusual. While loading the dishwasher, she suddenly said Madison had told her what I did. I had no idea what she was talking about. She gave me a look I'd never seen before, pure disgust, and said Madison came to her office that afternoon crying. According to Madison, I'd supposedly made a move on her 2 weeks ago, when Jo worked late. Madison claimed I texted her, asking if she would come over and watch a movie, because I was bored. She said she thought we were just hanging out as friends. Then, halfway through the movie, I allegedly put my hand on her leg and told her I'd always found her attractive. Madison said she froze, pushed my hand away, and left immediately. She didn't want to say anything before, because she didn't want to ruin our marriage, but apparently I texted her again yesterday, asked and talk about it, and she couldn't stay silent anymore. My stomach dropped. None of that happened. I told Jo Madison was lying. I never texted her, never invited her over. Nothing. I pulled out my phone to show her the message history. It was basically empty. A few group texts and maybe 3 individual messages over the past year. All mundane stuff, like telling Jo I was running late. Jo wouldn't even look at my phone. She said Madison had shown her screenshots from a different number. I asked to see them. She said Madison was too upset to send them, but that Jo had seen them herself. I pointed out how that made 0 sense. Why would I have a different number? Jo said I work in cybersecurity, so I could easily fake a number or use some app. I tried everything. I told her I was home that night playing online games with my buddy Liam and could prove it with Discord logs and game history. She said I could have done it after gaming. I said, fine. Check the Ring doorbell. It'll show no one came over. She claimed I probably deleted the footage. Every explanation I gave, she had a counter. It felt like she had already decided I was guilty. Nothing could change her mind. I asked why Madison would lie about something so serious. Jo screamed that Madison was her best friend and had nothing to gain from lying. Then she started crying, saying she had offended me at first, but Madison showed her the texts. She called Madison right there on speaker. Madison was sobbing, saying she was so sorry, that she never wanted this to happen, but couldn't live with the guilt. I tried to speak, and Madison said, please, just admit what you did. Don't make this harder on Jo. I said she was lying, and she cried even harder, saying she knew I denied and tried to make her look crazy. Joe hung up and told me to pack a bag and leave. I said, "No, this is my house too. I'm not leaving over lies." She said if I didn't go, she'd call the cops and claim I was making her feel unsafe. That threat broke something in me. I grabbed some clothes, my laptop, and my toothbrush and left, sat in my car for maybe 20 minutes, staring at nothing, then drove to my brother's apartment. Ethan opened the door, saw my face, and pulled me inside without questions. I told him what happened. He was pissed. He had met Madison at holidays and family events. Never liked her. Always said she gave off weird vibes, too attached to Joe. I thought he was paranoid, but maybe he saw something I missed. Ethan said I needed a lawyer immediately. False accusations like this could destroy my life. I couldn't sleep that night, replaying every interaction with Madison, trying to figure out if I'd done anything that could be twisted. Came up with nothing. Next morning, I called Joe straight to voicemail. Texted her, nothing. Sent a long email explaining everything, begging her to look at the evidence. Silence. I even called her mom, thinking she could talk sense into Joe. Her mom was ice cold, said Joe had already told her what happened and she was disappointed in me. I tried to explain, but she cut me off, saying Joe wouldn't lie and Madison had no reason to make anything up. Everyone had already decided I was guilty. That night at Ethan's, I made a decision. If Joe wasn't going to believe me, if she would take Madison's word without even considering that it could be lies, then maybe this marriage wasn't what I thought it was. The first week was rough. Ethan had to work during the day, so I sat on his couch scrolling through my phone, looking at old photos of me and Joe. Kept hoping she'd come to her senses, see the holes in Madison's story, and call to apologize. Phone stayed silent. I texted her every day for the first 5 days. Simple messages, asking if we could talk, saying I missed her. Every message ignored. On day 6, I drove past our house and saw Madison's car in the driveway at 11 a.m. on a Thursday. She'd basically moved in. That was the moment I realized this whole thing wasn't going to magically fix itself. Madison was practically living in my house every single day, feeding those lies nonstop. Joe had zero space away from her to think clearly. On day 7, Ethan sat me down and told me I needed to stop destroying myself. He said I couldn't keep driving past a house like some ghost, and I needed to stop texting someone who clearly wasn't going to respond. I needed to start protecting myself now. He gave me the number of his friend, who was a divorce lawyer. I stared at that contact for 2 full hours before I actually dialed it. The attorney's name was Richard. Older dude, maybe mid-50s, seen hundreds of marriages crash and burn. I met him the next morning in his office. I showed him everything. The nearly empty text history between Madison and I. My Discord logs proving I was gaming that entire evening. She claimed I tried something. My Ring doorbell history, showing no record of anyone coming over. Richard listened quietly, then said something that hit me hard. He said, even if we prove she made all of this up, even if Joe eventually realizes Madison lied, you still have to ask yourself if you could ever trust your wife again after what she chose to do. And he was right. Joe didn't just believe Madison. She never even wanted to consider that I might be telling the truth. She kicked me out, blocked me, and instantly sided with her friend without hesitation. She turned everyone around us against me like I meant nothing. Richard said we needed to file immediately. He explained that in our state, there's a required 60-day waiting period after filing before anything is finalized, longer if it's contested or there are disagreements over assets. He said if for some miracle Joe actually came to her senses before it all finalized, we could dismiss the petition. But at least this way, I'd be protected. I signed the paperwork that day. It didn't even feel real. It felt like I was watching someone else's life completely collapse. Richard said she would likely be served within a week. I left his office and walked around downtown aimlessly for hours. I ended up at the park by the river where Joe and I had our first date 9 years ago. We got ice cream that night and talked for 5 hours straight. I remember thinking on that night, this is the woman I'm going to marry someday. Now here I was, signing divorce papers because she believed a lie over me. That night, I called my best friend Liam, the same friend I was gaming with that night Madison accused me. I told him everything. He was stunned. He said he called Joe to confirm I was online with him that night. I told him not to bother. She wouldn't believe it anyway. Liam mentioned that Madison always seemed off. He remembered this one Christmas party 2 years ago where she got drunk and was weirdly clingy with Joe the entire night. I remembered that too, but we joked about it back then. Week 2 came, and I finally started functioning again. I couldn't live at Ethan's forever, so I started searching for apartments. Found a small one-bedroom around 20 minutes from work. Signed a 6-month lease. Ethan helped me move in, though I barely had anything since most of my stuff was still at the house. I bought cheap furniture and tried to make it feel like home, but it didn't. It felt hollow, lonely, depressing. I drowned myself in work. My boss could tell something was off, but didn't push. I stayed late almost every day. Took on extra projects. Anything to avoid walking back into that empty apartment. Ethan also pushed me to start going to the gym every morning. I hadn't worked out consistently since college, but lifting heavy weight gave me a temporary escape. It weirdly helped. Week 3, still nothing from Joe. Her silence was brutal. Richard called and told me Joe had been served. Apparently, she lost it. Her mom called his office screaming about how I abandoned her daughter at her lowest. How dare I file for divorce? Richard calmly explained that Joe kicked me out over a false accusation and then refused to speak to me. Her mom hung up. A part of me hoped being served would shock Joe awake, make her realize she went way too far. Still silence. Then something unexpected happened. One of our mutual friends, Casey, who worked at the clinic with Joe, messaged me on Instagram. She said she didn't believe I'd do what Madison accused me of. I asked her why, and she said Madison's behavior lately was really sketchy. She's basically living at Joe's place, gets defensive anytime someone brings me up, and honestly parts of her story are full of holes. Casey said even people at the clinic were starting to question Madison, but nobody wanted to confront Joe because she was mentally fragile. That DM gave me a little bit of hope that maybe one day the truth would come out. But it didn't change anything. I was still alone. My wife still hated me. And Madison was still painting herself as the victim. Week 4. Ethan practically forced me on a date. He set me up with one of his girlfriend's friends named Ashley. She worked in marketing. She was kind. We got drinks downtown. But my mind wasn't there. Halfway through, she looked at me and said, "You're not over your ex, are you?" I apologized and said I should probably not be dating while going through a divorce. She understood and wished me luck. I remember going home feeling more empty than before. By week 8, it started sinking in that this was just my new normal. Joe wasn't coming back. Divorce was happening. I started planning for a different future. Maybe moving to a new city, chasing the senior promotion at work, traveling like I always wanted to. Stuff Joe and I always talked about but kept putting off. Then week 10 rolled around, and everything flipped. Joe's mom called me. She was the last person I expected to hear from. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Her voice was shaking. She said she needed to tell me something and that she owed me an apology. Madison had gotten drunk at her house 3 nights earlier while Joe was working late. Madison started crying about how guilty she felt. Joe's mom assumed she meant guilty about coming forward with the accusation. Then Madison said something that made her freeze. She said she loved Joe so much, she couldn't stand to watch me have her anymore. Joe's mom asked her what she meant, and Madison fully broke down. She confessed that she had lied about everything. She admitted she'd been in love with Joe ever since high school. Watching us be happy together was unbearable. Madison thought if she ruined our marriage, then maybe Joe would finally see her differently. Joe's mom was shocked, horrified even. She confronted Madison right then and there, and Madison finally confessed everything. The fake screenshots, the lies, the whole scheme. She'd used some app to generate fake text conversations to make it look like they came from my number. Joe's mom kept apologizing over and over during that call, saying she should have trusted me, should have asked more questions. I thanked her for telling me, but honestly, I just felt numb, vindicated. Yeah, but the damage had already been done. I told her she had to tell Joe immediately. She said she'd been trying, but Joe refused to listen. I hung up and sat there staring at a wall. Part of me wanted to feel victorious, but mostly I just felt empty. 2 hours later, my phone started blowing up. Texts, dozens of them. I didn't even read them. Turned my phone off and went to bed. The next morning, 17 missed calls, maybe 30 texts. Finally, I opened them. Every single one was some version of, "Please call me," or "I'm sorry, we need to talk." I didn't respond. That afternoon, Richard called me. Joe's lawyer had reached out to ask if I'd be willing to meet, just to discuss reconciliation, they said. I told Richard to schedule the meeting, but make it clear it was only to finalize a divorce, nothing else. He said he'd handle it. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon at our house. Joe probably thought being home would make me emotional. I agreed, but told Richard he was coming with me. Friday arrived. I drove past that house for the first time in almost 3 months. Joe's car was in the driveway. So was Madison's. My stomach dropped. I called Richard. He said, "Wait, he'll handle it." We walked in together. Joe was on the couch, crying. Madison was standing behind her, a hand on her shoulder. The audacity. Richard immediately told her she had to leave, or we were walking out. Joe looked confused. "She's here to apologize, too," Joe said. I almost laughed. Madison started to speak, but Richard cut her off. Her presence was inappropriate. I had zero interest in hearing anything she had to say. Her face turned red. She glanced at Joe for backup, but Joe just sat there. Madison grabbed her purse and headed for the door, but as she passed me, she muttered under her breath that I'd ruined everything. That was the moment it clicked for Joe. Her face shifted from confusion to shock to disgust. She stood and demanded, "What do you mean?" Madison froze, trying to figure out how to spin herself out of this. Too late. Joe walked over and said her mom had told her everything, that Madison had confessed being in love with her. At first, she didn't want to believe it, but the way Madison looked at me made it obvious. Madison started crying, tried to grab Joe's hands, pleading that she had done it for them, that I was keeping Joe from seeing what they could have together. Joe recoiled as if hit, yelling for Madison to leave. Madison refused, rambling about loving Joe since they were 16, destroying her own marriage because she couldn't stop thinking about her. Then Joe married me, and she had to watch us together every day. Joe was shaking, screaming, demanding Madison leave. Madison tried to hug her. Joe shoved her off. Madison stumbled into the coffee table, got up, mascara running everywhere, glared at both of us with pure hatred. Then finally left. Door slammed. Silence. Joe collapsed onto the couch, sobbing. She looked at me, repeating how sorry she was. I didn't move. I just stood there, staring at the woman who was technically still my wife, but now felt like a complete stranger. Richard pulled the divorce papers from his briefcase and set them on the coffee table. Joe saw them and started crying even harder. Begged me not to sign, so we could fix it, that she'd do anything. I finally spoke, told her she threw me out of my own home, believed someone else over me with no real evidence, turned her family against me, refused to hear my side. She kept saying sorry, that she made a terrible mistake, that Madison manipulated her. I looked at Richard. He nodded. I turned back to Joe and said I hoped she finds someone she could actually trust, because it wasn't me, and it never would be again. I signed the papers right there on the coffee table. Joe begged me to stop, to consider therapy, said she'd make it up to me. I stood, walked toward the door. She grabbed my arm. I gently pulled away, said goodbye, and left. Could hear her calling after me as I got in the car. Richard followed. We drove to his office and finalized everything we could that day. That was 3 months ago. The divorce finalized 2 weeks ago. I'm actually seeing Ashley now, the girl Ethan set me up with. We reconnected about a month ago. Things are good. She knows everything. Doesn't judge. I moved into a bigger place. Got that promotion. Started traveling. Joe tried contacting me a few more times, but I blocked her everywhere. Ethan said she's in therapy, trying to process everything. Madison apparently moved back to Ohio. I don't feel bad for either of them. And me, I'm genuinely happy. Happier than I ever was in that marriage. Sometimes, the worst thing that happens ends up being the best thing. This was mine. What do you think about this story? Drop a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more real life stories.